I'm going to talk about something a little different, and I'm happy to answer any questions. You're going to find somebody who did not play high school football, did not coach football, as some of the speakers you've heard before, did some sports over the years, did baseball and tennis and a number of things in high school. But I want to talk a little about leadership lessons from sports and how important they are. My wife and I were out on the West Coast this last week. I had some business out there, and we had dinner with some friends of ours who have a son that is a Navy SEAL. And some of you may know the process for Navy SEALs, but they start with 1,000 people who are all in really good shape, and they whittle it down to a number which is generally something like 15 or 20 who graduate from the SEAL class. And we have really been interested in hearing over the years about how this young man moved from, someone who was sort of interested in college and, being in the military to competing and winning the Navy, getting into the Navy SEALs, and learned a lot about that process. One of the most important things we learned was that Navy SEALs come in all shapes and sizes. You would think that SEALs would be big, strong guys, but our friends pointed out that they all have a role on the team, and that some of them were undersized, and you would never believe they were a Navy SEAL, and some were bigger and stronger because they have different things that they have to do as part of the team. And I thought that was a great lesson in teamwork and leadership and the roles that people have. You have to be an incredible leader to get through that very taxing physical, and as they pointed out, mental competition, because so much of what the SEALs go through is not just physical, but it's also they test your mind and your ability to withstand pain, those sort of things that you all know very well. But a lot of it was about developing leadership through challenges that people face and learning lessons that they've learned during the course of this competition. I don't think it's very much different in any type of activity you have. And one of the first ways you learn as a kid to be a good leader is by participating in sports. Whether you're good or bad at it, playing Little League baseball or playing high school football, you just learn incredible lessons. And I think your first teachers are first your parents, but the second are often your sports coaches. I mean, I still think back to things I learned from Johnny and I were talking about this Coach Lewis, who was my high school tennis coach, but knew him really well. He was a football coach and basketball, but the things I learned from him about everything from talking about World War II, which he was on a Navy ship in World War II, to growing up in segregated Orangeburg, where his dad taught at SC State. And he told us stories about that, being a teacher and coach at Booker T. Washington High School in Columbia, and eventually ended up in Lancaster. But just the life's lessons we learned from Coach Lewis about what he had been through, things that, a white kid from another part of town wouldn't have necessarily known without the engagement in sports. And you guys see that all the time with the people that the kids that you see, they come from all walks of life. I got to think you learn a lot from engaging with them, and they learn a lot from engaging with you. So these sports figures, the coaches, are really part of the first group of teachers that kids have. And I just have always believed that kids who do not participate in sports miss out on so much. Learning how to win, learning how to lose, learning lessons from success and failure, being part of a team, understanding the role that each of you can play in a team, getting to know people from different backgrounds. Those are things you don't get unless you participate in sports. And I think one of my observations has always been you don't find a lot of great leaders emerge from long distance running, the things that you do alone. But you do see people who were often average players get a lot out of being part of a team, and they may transform those lessons into being a offensive line coach or a head coach in high school football or college football, or they might transfer those lessons into being a doctor or, a political leader or a business leader. But many people that I deal with and have dealt with over the years, both as governor and also in my business now, many of the people that have, strong competitive instincts, good character, who do things the right way, are very motivated to be successful. Many, I would say most of them, participated in sports in some fashion when they were a kid. There are those rare exceptions, but many of them participated in sports activities. And I think what you all do is incredibly important in, the lessons that these folks learn, and whether they're good or bad at it, they just get a lot out of it. And I thought I'd just talk for a few minutes just about some of the things that I've learned, and then we can, open it up for any questions that you might have. I got into politics when I was about 28 years old. I think I was 29 actually when I was first elected. And one of the things I learned from that I thought sports, allowed me to learn was, as I mentioned earlier, the ability to get along with people, and how important it was to hear people out, what they had to say, to respect the fact that there were different perspectives and different roles that people had. Because in politics, it's at best a 50-50 proposition. You think about it, when somebody wins the presidency, they might do it with 51% of the vote. Well, that means out of every 100 people, 49 people can't stand you. And, maybe 51 like you, or they tolerate you more than the other person. And a test of the ego is that even in a great situation in politics, you're going to win by a landslide if you get 54% of the vote, which means that if you're talking to 10 people, maybe 5.5 of them like you okay, and 4.5 of them don't like you so much. So that's, that is a real that is a test of ego, to understand that. And part of your task as a political leader is you've got to manage that. You got to try to not hold grudges against those who've been against you, and recognize that when you take the oath of office, it's about trying to move the team forward. And in some cases, those people have been loyal and strong teammates with you, people that have helped you get to where you are. But in other cases, there are people that haven't, that have fought you on things that may not agree with you. So one of the things first things you learn is that you got to put these elections behind you. Just like you've got to put a loss behind you sometimes in sports. You got to put that loss behind you and move on to how you adjust and are going to win the next game. You just have to understand that. And I thought that was, for me, a real help to sort of put that stuff aside and recognize that there was a larger, as a leader of an organization, that you couldn't let the whatever disagreements if you have had get in the way of trying to address the common good and do things to try to move, in this case, your state forward, but move people forward. And I think that's really true about any organization. In football, I think you guys would say that you've learned that treating people consistently is really important, and treating them right, and making them understand that there are consequences to things that they do incorrectly, and that there's praise when they do things correctly. And like any team, when they come together early in the year, I imagine that there are a lot of problems to work out, and your goal is to make sure that as the season progresses, they get better, and that they don't keep repeating the same mistakes, and that as you head to the playoffs, hopefully, that the team is clicking on all cylinders. I mean, government's no different than that. It is about trying to make sure that everybody, other elected officials, the people that work for you, are working toward a common goal. When they're sniping at each other, when there are disagreements, when their personal grievances get in the way of the common good, then you got problems. And that sometimes takes a little time to develop, to try to make sure everybody understands their roles. And in some cases, you have to, get rid of people that just can't do it. And I'm sure you all recognize that situation where you've got an incredibly talented person that, despite your best efforts, they just can never be a good teammate. That's no different it was no different when I was governor. It's no different now as a business leader and a lawyer. I have 120 people that work for me now in 9 different states. And we've got some of them that are incredibly talented that unfortunately over the years have just not been able to understand teamwork. They were probably long distance runners. But we've got a lot of others who understand that concept, who I think have been well coached during life. And in many cases, these are people that, when you dig down, they were competitive athletes. And that's actually one of the things I look for in hiring is whether or not people, what's their track record been like? And if they, participated in a high school football or basketball or something like that, I feel like I learn a lot. And I feel like they generally are good employees and often, people of high character. And that's a very helpful attribute. And it's important for you all to understand that you all are in your coaching roles. You really are. We talk about molding young leaders, and sometimes I get tired of hearing that from college coaches. When I hear that, I'm probably like a lot of people. I wonder about that, but I think with high school coaches, there is absolutely no doubt that is the role that they play. It's harder, I think, when you get higher up in major college sports. Probably for somebody like Todd, it's in a smaller school like Newberry that's definitely the case. And I think there are many outstanding college coaches, but it's harder for them because of the economics of coaching to do as much as they probably did 20 or 25 years ago. I do want to talk just for a minute too about again about transferability of these character traits. We had a couple of years ago, I was at an event that our law firm put on in Charleston, and we had probably 500 lawyers from across the country who were there that were part of our group. And one of the speakers they asked us to bring in was Dawn Staley. And Dawn Staley came in and talked a bit about women's sports and about leadership. And the guy sitting next to me, who was a very distinguished trial lawyer, nationally recognized, leaned over to me and said, "She sounds just like a great trial lawyer." And I thought about that for a minute when I listened to it and thought, the character traits of good trial lawyers are pretty similar to the character traits of good business leaders and the character traits, frankly, of good coaches. And that is leadership skills, communication skills, the ability to move people from individual goals to team goals. The communication skills are of the utmost importance, learning how to win, learning how to lose, staying engaged with their players beyond beyond the sports calendar. Those are all very important leadership skills. And I thought that was true. Certainly that Coach Staley's remarks indicated that she had those attributes. And I really do believe great coaches have those and great leaders do. I mean, leadership's no different. In a lot of ways, you have very specific, finely honed skills on the football field, but frankly, the traits of leadership of a governor or of a business leader or of a coach are not all that different if they're really good at it. There's certain common elements and certain common skills you've got to have to be successful at it. And I think that's always been true. That you have those certain attributes and that they do come in all shapes, and leaders come in all shapes and sizes too. Fortunately, I'm in my mid-60s, and over my business career, I have seen leaders in all shapes and sizes, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, people that were quiet, that were great leaders, people that were outspoken, that were terrific leaders. I've seen really talented people that I thought could be great leaders, but they could never get beyond themselves and the importance of themselves to shape team goals. And I've seen people who showed remarkable growth. And I'm always a little worried when people say leadership skills are something that you're born with and aren't developed, because I just don't believe that's true. I think they can be developed, and one of the first places they're developed is on the athletic field, um, which again is why what you're doing is so important. So those are just a few kind of observations about it. Johnny, I mean, I'm happy to answer any questions. I thank you all for the great work that you do, and hope you're having a great session, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Hi, Jim, it's Jane. Can you hear me?
I can, Jane.
One thing, I know somebody else might have some questions, but a lot of people in this room today are not just, we got some coaches, athletic directors, superintendents, and principals, and a lot of them are, of course, dealing with hiring. And I have watched you from day one put together successful teams, not just when you were governor, but now in your career as well. And I was wondering if you would go over some tips. I know you mentioned that when you're interviewing somebody that participates in sports, but I would like you to go over with them. Think when you're interviewing, when you're putting together a team, you're hiring people. I'm talking about now hiring an assistant coach or hiring a new head coach. What are things when you're interviewing people that you look for positively, and you mentioned, and what would you say were red herrings that you have seen in your experiences hiring and firing people?
Well, I've certainly learned how to fire people. That's one thing I have learned how to do, and I hope I've learned how to hire them. But yeah, we all make, well, first of all, Jane, I think we all make mistakes in hiring from time to time, and that probably is where you learn things that there are red flags out there. And I would say early on in my hiring that I sometimes let talent get in the way of teamwork. Um, I would find people that I knew had a lot of talent, and I felt we could develop and be a major contributor. And I overlooked some of the potential character flaws and just inability to be an effective part of a team. So, I mean, there are things you learn, I think, over the years that you all there probably have. In my profession, the first thing is if someone is interested in how much money they're going to make, that's good. If they're obsessed with it, that's bad. Because they're not day one, if they're preoccupied with that, then they're probably going to they're not going to be focused on their career development like they should. I mean, they're in our business, they're going to do really well if they do the little things well, and if they, are focused on trying to learn. So it's always a red flag if there is an obsession with that. And I would say the other is I've always been concerned if people are obsessed with titles, and that is a particular disease that younger people have. It's your sort of your title is what is what we're going to give you, and you're going to earn raises and you're going to earn new titles. But I think probing questions about whether they have participated in sports activities, it's always a red flag for me. I mean, I look at their resumes, and if they bounced around a lot, that's not a good sign. Some people believe that they left for better career opportunities, but if I see someone who never lights anywhere for very long, that's not a good sign. I mean, you at least need to ask questions about why they've moved so much. I know coaching's a little different because sometimes those moves are involuntary, but by and large, you want someone who has stayed to get the most out of a position. So, Jane, those are kind of red flags for me. The other piece is the firing piece, and that I know is an unpleasant conversation, but it seems to me that we all delay too long. If something isn't fitting, it's important to communicate really clearly about what the problems are, and then to try to see if you can address those. But if it's not, one of the failures we all have is hanging on too long if something's not working out, and trying to allow the person to trying to move on and allow the person to move on to a new role in another organization. I just think it's human nature And part of it is you don't want to fire somebody, but part of it is we just don't want to admit we made a mistake. I just have always found, whether it was me in government or in business, that the pride of not wanting to admit you made a mistake gets in the way of trying to make the right decision for the organization. And that's good for you and for them, but it's also good for the colleagues, many of whom are looking to you to make the tough decision. I mean, that's why they have you in a leadership role.
One thing, as an attorney and as a former governor of South Carolina, what about the NIL in sports and maybe filtering to high schools? As I know it's in college big time. What's your thoughts on that aspect?
Yeah, I've got to say, I don't know yet. I mean, we're all of us of a certain age are very nostalgic about the idea that kids could, would go to school and stay 4 years. I mean, that was great. And I personally think it's better for kids to go to a place and stay, because you don't want them at the first sign of trouble that can be a character building experience, and they can learn, from that and eventually become a very productive and good player. It's a great life lesson too. And I'm troubled that the kids that move on at the first sign of problems. But the flip side of that, we all know, is when you look at there may be some college coaches in the room, but you look at what major college coaches and athletic directors are making off sports, and you look at what universities are making. Big universities are making a lot of money, particularly big universities in conferences like my alma mater. And I just remember Johnny, a college coach, telling me years ago, who did things the right way, a good friend of mine, about having a kid who he could not invite the kid to come stay at home with him during Thanksgiving holidays, and the kid didn't have anywhere to go because of NCAA rules. And it did seem a little inconsistent that, he was making a ton of money and that he couldn't provide, something basic for this kid, during non-school time, couldn't arrange for the kid to go get a Thanksgiving meal somewhere. It just seemed sort of ridiculous. So I like the idea of trying to provide some stipend for players. What we've got to put an end to is just the sudden exit and the poaching and all the things that go on. I would bet for smaller schools, it's frustrating. They develop somebody who's talented and immediately they're moving away. But having said that, this is the reality of my job. We develop some good talent, and occasionally they go out on their own or they move to another firm. And, it just forces us to spend more time focused on developing the talent of the rest of the people that we have. They're part of the team. So I think where I'd like to see NIL move is to have some more consistent standards in place about what can occur and when it can occur and about how much. And it sure would be nice if those benefits could be spread beyond individual athletes to the whole team, so that it reinforces the idea that if I'm a quarterback and I'm making big NIL money, that the rest of the team that helped me look good, that they're an important part of this too. There's a lot to work out on that. And, I'm not confident the NCAA can do that. I'm not. I think the disparity in interest among small and large schools are such that it'll be difficult to do. It may be left to the conferences or the ADs to try to work toward that. I'm not sure Congress is the answer. I mean, I've been in a legislative body before, and they're not good at these sort of things, because they govern by anecdote and seldom are really that thoughtful about sort of long-term fixes to it.
Well, thank you very much.
Happy to do it. And I got to say a word for my friends at Founders too. I think they helped put this on, and Bruce and team do a great job. But finally, thanks to you all for what you do for the kids in South Carolina. There's no more important role than high school coaches, principals, administrators. It's just I think back on, even now in my mid-60s, I think back of the role that a lot of those folks played in my life and in the lives of my classmates. And it's just, it's something that never leaves you even till you reach a later age. So, while the financial gains aren't always as great as there are in other careers, believe me, the impact you have on people is substantial.